Happy Hobbit Day to all you nerds out there in Nerdland. Today we are finishing what we started. Wait, that's the wrong movie. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Super Bowden Bros. Today we are finishing our series on what is different in the Lord of the Rings movies versus the books, and we're finishing it up with my favorite movie of all time, The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. Now, let's get into this because there are some differences, some weird differences, and kind of major differences in this one. So this may take a little bit longer than the other ones, but isn't that appropriate? I mean, The Return of the King is 4 hours and 20 minutes if you watch the extended edition, which that should be the only edition that you're watching. So pulling no punches here, number 5, we're going to get really nerdy really fast. Number 5 has to do with the creature Shelob. Shelob in this movie is, of course, in Return of the King, but actually, she's in the Two Towers book. So in the movie, we see Frodo and Sam. They are traveling along the path of Carith Ungol. They go up the stairs to, Carith Ungol. And they get up there to the top, and Frodo goes, "Oh no, Sam, you're being a jerk. Get away." And makes Sam go away. That never happens, first of all. And then Frodo enters into this tunnel with Gollum by himself. And as he goes through the tunnel, he starts to realize, "Oh, Sam, I was an idiot. I was a fool." And then, of course, this giant spider comes out of nowhere and attacks Frodo. And he turns on the Light of Elendil, which is still like one of my favorite parts of the whole movie. But in actuality, this never happens in the Return of the King book. Why? Because it actually happens in the Two Towers book. If you rewind to the Two Towers that we talked about last week, technically this should have happened at the end of that film if the books were being, or the movies were being accurate to the book. This just never happens, and it sucks. But I get why it was done. I understand that it needed to be along this plot point and plot line of where they wanted to go. And timeline wise, if you look at the timeline, it's actually pretty accurate to when Frodo and Sam are up the stairs of Carith Ungol. So timeline wise, Tolkien enthusiast Peter Jackson has us beat. Number 4, the Scourging of the Shire. Now, the Scourging of the Shire is probably the biggest difference from movie to book as far as timeline and as far as location. Now, what are these differences, you ask? So let me walk you through it so that you understand. So in the book, Frodo and Sam, Merry and Pippin, all come back to the Shire, and it is destroyed. Saruman has taken over the Shire with orcs and with Grima Wormtongue by his side, and they've set up their camp there, and everything is terrible, and it's like hell on earth, basically, for all the hobbits. Now, in the movie version, this never happens. Now, it is hinted at, and let me tell you why this is hinted and where exactly this is hinted at. On top of the Tower of Orthanc, as you see Saruman in the film talking to Gandalf and Aragorn and everyone, he's using his voice, his deep, big, booming voice, to try to persuade them otherwise. Grima is there, and he hears what the things have been saying, and Theoden reaches out to him and says, be free of him, come down, be free of him, and Saruman just tosses him off to the side, tells him to shut up, basically slaps him, and then Grima stabs Saruman in the back, and the famous Christopher Lee, happens. Well, that does happen in the book, but it happens in the Shire. So after they lose a battle in the Shire versus the hobbits, Grima, I guess, is angry, comes up behind Saruman and kills him. So that is probably not only the difference in where he is killed, but the fact that Frodo and Sam come back in the movie and nothing has happened like that is a huge change. Now, you look at that and you say, why did they change it? Why wasn't this the same? From what Peter Jackson has said, how can you start the story back up again? It makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. Would it have been cool to see? Yeah, that would have been cool to see. But the movie is already 4 hours and 20 minutes if you watch the extended edition. I would be fine with more. I know you guys would be fine with more too. But people that aren't like us, people that don't like the kind of stuff that we like, they'll never sit through it. And that ultimately is what they're thinking of in Hollywood when they get to these movies like that. So yeah, number 4, Scourging of the Shire. Never happened. Wish it did. But what can you do? Number 3, and let's keep this one simple. Number 3 has to do with Aragorn and the location of where he actually looks into the Palantir. So in the movie, he goes into the White Hall after the Battle of Pelennor Fields, picks up the Palantir, and shows himself to Sauron. Now, in the book, he actually does this in Edoras. So what is the point of why this was done in the White Hall and why the other one in the book was done in Edoras? I think simply it has to do with the fact that they are trying to get Sauron's gaze upon Aragorn. Because at this point, they make the plan to actually lure Sauron's eye gaze to Aragorn instead of Frodo. And so at this point, I think it helps that. I think it establishes, hey, look, I'm coming for you, big boy. I'm going to help Frodo out. And I think this is why this change was made. It does make sense to me. It does seem more cinematic, more dramatic, and more emotional. And I think that this choice that was made, the difference that was made, is a good choice. Now, if you've not seen the extended edition, you don't have a clue of what I'm talking about because this scene isn't in the extended edition. Also, to give credit to Gandalf, Gandalf is the one that comes up with the idea of getting Sauron's gaze off of Frodo. So, just giving Gandalf some credit on that one. Number 2, the Army of the Dead. So we know, established in the movie, that Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli go down the Dimwalt Road, and they go to see this army that Isildur actually put a curse on, that they would not be able to rest until they fulfilled their oath to the King of Gondor. So in this movie, Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli go into this place, and they talk to the Army of the Dead, and or the King of the Dead, I should say, and it doesn't seem like he's going to convince him to help out. They're not going to fulfill their oath. They take off. They go away. And they leave that place. They get out. And then there's the Corsair ships that they're supposed to stop. And, of course, they don't think they're going to stop. And then here comes the King of the Dead out of the woodwork there, as I say. And he says, "We fight." So here's the difference. In the movie, the King of the Dead and the Army of the Dead take out the Corsair ships, but they also go to the Battle of Pelennor Fields. In the book, they just help them take out the Corsair ships. They don't take anything else. They don't go to Pelennor with them. That's just fictional in the movie. I mean, it's all fiction. But they go, in the movie, they don't go to Pelennor. They stop. They fulfill their oath by taking all those people out. Now, why were these changes made? Probably to make it a little more dramatic and a little more of a happy moment. Because let's face it, the way the movie sets it up, it seems impossible for them to overcome all those odds. They do it in the book, but in the movie, it's left to the Army of the Dead to show up and to clear these people out. Good choice, maybe, maybe not, I don't know. I still don't know how I feel about that one, but I do know this was the difference, and it is what it is. Number 1, we're sticking with Aragorn here. Number 1 has to do with Aragorn's destiny. So what is his destiny? Well, in the film, they keep pushing that they're ready for the king to come back, they're ready for the king to come back, and Aragorn just seems reluctant and that he doesn't want to be king. Now, in the book, it's completely different. Aragorn is like, yeah, sure, I want to be king. Let's go do this. Let's kick some butt and crack some skulls. And Aragorn is all for it. He knows what his family's bloodline is and what it's like, but he also knows his strength. So the thing that you see through the course of all 3 films is that Aragorn is just kind of, I don't know if I want to do that. Like, I really don't. I don't want to do this. But in the books, he's completely the opposite. He's just like, Come on, let's go. And so, where we're getting to on number 1 is Anduril, Flame of the West. In the Return of the King movie, Aragorn gets this blade at the location that Elrond shows up to him, right above the Dimwalt Road, or right below the Dimwalt Road, and he hands him the Anduril and the sword, and that's where he decides to be king, because he says, you can go get this army, and they will listen to you. They're summoned to the King of Gondor, and this is where he makes his conscious decision, I'm going to be the king. But in the movie, or in the book version, he actually gets the sword when he's at Rivendell, and he knows his destiny. So he's had the sword all along. So, with that said, I can see why that was made a choice for a character building reason and everything else. But it would have been cool to see the character just be like, yeah, I know who I'm supposed to be. I'm going to be the king. But then I guess it would take away from moments of Boromir saying, I would have called you my brother, my captain, my king. It's a two-way road. And we don't know which way it would have been, if it would have been better the other way or not. But either way, Return of the King is still my favorite movie of all time. All the choices that are made in it, while I don't always agree with all of them, I see why they were made, and I love the movie. And I'll never change my opinion on that. So with that said, that concludes our series on the major differences in The Lord of the Rings. And maybe we'll do another one eventually, because there are more differences that were not mentioned here. Little teeny things that you'd have to be a super nerd like me to even appreciate. But guys, thank you for joining me. Make sure you subscribe to this channel right here. And then you follow us on Twitter right down here. God bless you guys. We will see you next time. Happy Hobbit Day. And remember, keep it nerdy.